We've talked about this a lot this season, Dean Legge and Matt DeBerry with you again, about Georgia and kind of they're not last year's team, Matt. This is what Kirby said. I think this was Monday about Georgia's where they're at. Actually, it was Tuesday. He said when he was asked about the team's identity, he said probably grit and toughness. He said the way they practice, I really like it. They're really a unique, connected group, a little different than last year's group. Last year's group felt like they had been around longer. This group created a little bit of identity of how they care for each other, but also grit and toughness they play with. What's your kind of immediate reaction to what he's saying there about grit and toughness? Do you buy that, or do you think he's just trying to articulate that they're different than a season ago? What's your take?
I do buy it a little bit. Listen, every coach wants to have grit and toughness instilled in their team and in their programs. Of course, those are football terms that you want your guys to have. But I do think he's talking about guys like Nolan Smith, who really cares for this team. He's passionate. He's a leader, and he also has some, grit and toughness to his game as well. Of course, last year you just had so many guys with experience, especially those linebackers who were multi-year starters. Jordan Davis was a senior. Devonta Wyatt had been there for a while. Trayvon Walker had a lot of experience going into that year. Whereas this year, it's a lot of younger guys who are emerging as the 4 and 5 star guys that they recruited out of high school, and they're playing very well. Now, this defense doesn't appear to be as good, and as last year's group, but that's what we expected coming into the season. But Dean, they're still probably one of the best defenses in the SEC, maybe in the country. We'll see how they, do later in the schedule against teams like Mississippi State and Tennessee. That's where this defense is really going to be tested. But the secondary could, be a little better at times down the field in coverage. They could get a little bit more pressure just getting to the quarterback. I think they're doing a good job of, rushing the quarterback, making them escape the pocket and do things they don't want to. But it doesn't seem like they're getting there as much. Maybe those sacks will come, but I do think that this team does fly around, and that defense does fly around, and they have a lot of toughness to them. And you do have some veteran guys, especially in the secondary, who are playing well, especially guys like Chris Smith and Keely Ringo at times as not played as well as we've seen him in the past, but he's still a really good player. And I think that collectively as a defense, they are going to get better and better as the season goes along. But I think, yeah, he wants them to be gritty and tough. That's kind of what he's wanted his team, especially his defense, to be for the last several years. So I do buy that a little bit at least.
Yeah, so just real quick, they are ranked eighth in the country in total defense, Matt. They're only permitting 263.6 yards a game. That's very, I mean, Alabama is at 250. Ohio State is at 253. Ohio State certainly is someone to watch here. In terms of scoring defense, they're actually higher. Um, they are, I picked scoring offense, and Georgia is really high on that as well. But they're number four in the country in scoring defense. I, I don't know. I can't. I'm not sure. I'll do the math when you're talking, but they may be able to get under 10 points a game if they shut Vanderbilt out. I do not expect Vanderbilt to score double digits personally, but no one is under 8 points a game. You remember a season ago, Matt, a lot of the year Georgia was at I think 6 or 5 points per game, and that went up after the Alabama game. But also, too, Alabama is near the top there. They're 12 and a half. I don't see Ohio State's allowed 16 a game. So when you get down there against Ohio State, you can score. The grittiness and toughness, I mean, it's hard to say last year's group wasn't gritty and tough, to be frank. But I think we're all trying to articulate how you go from a national championship team, to a team that we don't know if they're going to win the national championship or not. But like Trayvon is gone, and this is my I don't know if this is my favorite picture from last year, but this is those are the three first round guys. Now only one of them remains. You can pick up DAWGSTRUCTION. The link is down below if you get it right now today. You get and you have to email me immediately. You get a red zone T-shirt. I think these guys are pretty gritty only because they because of the win at Missouri to me. was a significant moment in the season, certainly, but also a proof that they could stick in there long enough. Let me add this too, and I kind of sidetracked on the defense. Only one game, Matt, has anyone scored 2 touchdowns on these guys. And in addition, let me add that Oregon is scoring almost 50 points a game outside of the Georgia game. I mean, that's insane. So what, you know, Ohio State, excuse me, is at 49 points a game. Tennessee is at 47. And then you look at number 9, and that's Oregon. They're at 42 points a game. They didn't score on Georgia, man. They scored 3.
No.
They scored a field goal. That was it.
Yeah. That's
So
tough, gritty defense right there. And I think it's a little easier to put that label on them when it kind of feels like another no-name defense, right? Other than
yeah,
Jalen Carter. I mean,
yes.
there's just a lot of guys playing well together, which comes off as, gritty, tough, compared to last year where you knew several guys were going to be first rounders. And there
Let
were
me
lots
ask you
of
this: who is the second best player on the defense?
It might be Chris Smith. It might be
Okay,
Jamon Dumas Johnson.
what about Malachi? I would argue it probably might be Malachi. Am I wrong?
Maybe not yet. He's making a lot
Okay.
of plays, and you could tell he could be next year maybe the best player on the defense.
Or on the
But
team?
I think, or on the team, he's playing very, very well. So I just halfway through his freshman season, maybe not the best player on the team just yet, but I mean, we've talked about it for a while.
There's no one thing, Matt. Like
Yeah.
when you say, "Hey, you can really run on Georgia." Well, that's not really true. You can throw on them. We haven't seen that yet necessarily. We saw now they're starting to really get aggressive in the run game. I wonder if that's a 1 week thing. I mean, like they're going to kind of have to show me over the next few weeks. But if they're going to explode on people like they have lately, I mean, they're 29th in the country right now at almost 200 yards rushing. And rushing statistics can be skewed because of the academies. I mean, you have Air Force at 1, Army at 2, Navy at 12. So that's not really. I mean, and you can make the case that passing is skewed as well, I guess, but because they're not going to throw it at all. But Georgia throwing the ball is 12th in the country at 320. I mean, so they are very close to being balanced here. If I told you Georgia, if I told you Matthew, if I told you Georgia threw for more yards per game than Ohio State, would you believe me?
No, I don't think I would. Actually,
Well,
I wouldn't, Dean.
right. It is hard to believe, but
Yeah.
it is true. And they're not throwing for as many yards as Mississippi State. But I guess it goes back to my point, or excuse me, it goes back to the global point, which is it's hard. This is an all-court team. This is a Kobe Bryant, or this is someone you're going to have to stop them going to the basket. You're going to have to worry about their jumper. This is a person that can hit forehands, backhands. They can serve. They're not a serve and volleyer, but they can do that if they have to. There's a lot of stuff that this team can do. There's no easy way to deal with them, I don't think. If they're not playing well, then that's complicated. But I don't. I think this whole season we're going to spend comparing to last year's team, and I understand that because last year's team was as formidable a team as we've seen in a very long time. But I mean, is this group special, Matt? Can we know that yet, or is it only that they can be special if they win the national championship?
If they get through Florida and Tennessee, I think this team has the chance to be special and have a special season. Now, they're not as good as they were last year. We've said that a lot now, but they could still have a special season, even though the team might not be as good. But I think everyone does that if you're a fan of any particular team and who has seen them win a championship before. Every team is going to be compared. Well, how do they stand up against that team that won a championship? Are they that good? Can they do what they did? And Georgia fans are going to, continue to do that for a while, especially the rest of the season. But if they can go on the road and beat Mississippi State after beating a Tennessee team that may be undefeated in Athens, then the schedule looks a lot harder and tougher now than it did maybe before the season. We
Right.
thought Tennessee was going to be good. Looks like they're probably better than we think. Mississippi State is better than we think. Kentucky's not as good as we thought. But still, that could maybe still be a tricky game up in Lexington if they haven't wrapped up the East by then, if they do beat Tennessee and Mississippi State. But those are two good teams and teams that could give Georgia some trouble. And if they win both of those games and then just have Kentucky and Georgia Tech left, then, yeah, you're talking about a special season where they could once again go undefeated through the regular season.
So I think mathematically, if they play Kentucky at this stage, they would. If they get to Kentucky undefeated, they will have won the East. They would have
Yeah,
had to have won the East.
right.
I think that one thing too that you know the journey is going to always be different. None of these games, excuse me, none of these seasons mimic the season before. If you look at 2011, Alabama, a team that lost to LSU, did not play for the SEC championship, and then beat them 21 to nothing, I believe the score was, in Louisiana. You cannot really compare that to you can compare it, but a season later they were a different team, I would say, in 12 and had to survive Georgia. They lost to Texas A&M, and then went on to bludgeon Notre Dame in the national championship game. These weren't back-to-back seasons, but Clemson in 16 was not. I mean, you had a third-year starting quarterback in 16, and they
Yeah.
survived the national championship game. They won it on the last play of the game. In 18, they had to survive Syracuse, and that was the only game that was really super competitive for them, I think. I can't remember every single game they played, but
I think you're right. Yeah.
and they blew out Alabama, in the championship game. So you don't ever know um, what's happened here, Matt, too, is we've had three generational teams in a row win it. I think the 19 LSU team was something the likes of which we might not ever see again. And then you look at 20 with Alabama, and that offense is maybe the greatest offense we've ever seen in college football. I mean, it was amazing. And they did that during COVID. And then Georgia just basically said, we're going to use a dominant defense to get us there. But by the way, we're really going to be good at offense. And they were.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no season mimics the other. But I do think that they have their chance to be special. It's just not new. That's the thing now, man. It's
Yeah.
like it's not as new.
Yeah. And we're talking about, the expectations for this team years ago were sky high. Now that they've won a national championship, everything is going to be, that or bust. And that's really
Right.
tough to put on a program and a coach and those players, but that's where they are. That's what
All right, Matt.
standard, these expectations.
All right, Matt and I are breaking up slightly, so we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.